The Drake Group Education Fund is dedicated to educating the public and professionals in our business with fact-based information featuring the experts in our profession so that we all might do a better job helping college athletes realize the promise of a baccalaureate degree and becoming all they can be as athletes. So we welcome you to our 30th webinar. And if you have your calendars out, please save Thursday, January 18th, our next webinar. The topic is NCAA governance. Is there a future? It's no secret that the NCAA is not enforcing its inducement or extra benefit rules, letting NIL booster collectives do pretty much whatever they want because the NCAA is fearful of continued litigation. So there will be much to discuss. So please join us Thursday, January 18th, at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern. One more thing, I'd like to thank all of you who so generously contributed to the Drake Group Education Fund last week on Giving Tuesday. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. And last but not least, I'd like to thank our moderator, Cassandra Ramsey, and each of our panelists for contributing their expertise on the topic of NIL education. Giving college athletes the right to monetize their names, images, and likenesses via such employment outside their institutions was long overdue. It's now up to college athletic departments to make sure our young athletes have the financial literacy, knowledge of tax laws, and skills with which to evaluate and hire agents. This topic is a great example of why our webinar series is so important. Webinars provide us with the opportunity to share new ideas, recalibrate our thinking on issues, and get up to date on important topics. So we're pleased to have you join us. And now I will introduce our moderator, Cassandra Ramsey, a Washington, D.C. attorney, the sports law chair for the District of Columbia Bar's Arts, Media, Entertainment, and Sports Law community, and an advocate for athletes' rights. She's written 2 ebooks to assist current and prospective college athletes in meeting the challenges of their newly won NIL opportunities. Welcome, Cassandra, and thank you.
Hello, thank you, Julie. And thank you to you all for attending and for joining us as we explore how to best meet the education needs for college athletes in the new NIL space. We are honored to have a stellar group of panelists. I know you all have had the opportunity to read their full bios when you registered for this program, but I will ask each of them to briefly introduce themselves before I ask them to respond to my first question. Also, I want to emphasize that the panelists are expressing their own opinions and not the opinions of the organizations of which they are employed or are members unless they make that distinction in their remarks. So let's begin. And I'll start with you, Antonio, if you could please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Antonio Vanos. I am a faculty member in the Department of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at TCU. And I'm also an associate director in the Institute for Entrepreneurship Innovation. I teach entrepreneurial NIL, and I am in charge of all education all NIL education at TCU. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jeremy Jones.
Hey, everybody. Jeremy Jones, athlete marketing director at Octagon Sports Agency. I oversee NIL and NFL contracts in terms of marketing, off-field dollars. Heavy emphasis on these are my opinions as we go into this today. I'm a former collegiate athlete myself, played at an SEC school, played football. So hopefully I can share some knowledge with you guys, and thank you guys for joining.
Next, we have Jada.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jada Mumjo. I am the chair of the Sport Management Department at the University of New Haven. I am overseeing 4 different programs, both at undergrad and grad level. I'm a former professional athlete from Turkey and bringing some different perspective.
And next we have Angelica McDonald.
Hi, my name is Angelica McDonald. I am the managing attorney for McDonald Law PLLC. I help athletes, their parents when it comes to contract negotiation, and even NIL strategy. But I also co-founded a NIL collective called Rise HBCU, where we help to create and provide NIL opportunities as well as NIL education for HBCU athletes.
Again, thank you to all the panelists for being here today. Before we get into the questions, I would just like to provide just some background information, just to provide some context for the panel. So we are currently in our third year of college athletes being allowed to profit from their name, image, and likeness. Many college athletes have taken advantage of their new opportunities entering various types of NIL deals. While NIL has opened the door for college athletes to reap some of the financial benefits of their labor, it has left many college athletes needing access to educational resources to better navigate their new opportunities. Per a survey conducted by the NCAA, 39% of women's college athletes and 42% of men's college athletes indicated that they need more resources to assist with navigating NIL opportunities. Some state laws require that college athletes be provided with NIL education. For example, Texas NIL law requires that Texas colleges and universities have their athletes attend a financial literacy and life skills workshop at the beginning of the first and third academic years. Texas is not the only state to have this requirement. Several others do, one of them being Florida. Despite these education-related provisions being included in state NIL laws, various college athletes have indicated a need for more NIL education. This need was made clear earlier this year when we saw our first lawsuit related to a NIL deal, where former University of Florida football player Gavon Dexter sued Big League Advance Fund regarding his NIL contract. Per the complaint, Dexter and Big League Advance Fund entered a NIL deal where Dexter agreed to allow BLA to use his NIL and garner marketing deals on his behalf in exchange for $436,485. BLA was also to receive a 15% cut of Dexter's pre-tax NIL earnings for 25 years, which would basically span his entire NFL career. Dexter sued, alleging that this contract was void as it violated Florida's NIL law as the term extended far beyond his time as a college athlete, and BLA was not a registered athlete agent under Florida law. Dexter's case highlighted, again, the need for college athletes to have resources to NIL education and the importance of this panel today. So with that, we will get into the questions, and I'll start with you, Antonio. And my first question is the educational requirement in the Texas NIL law what led TCU Athletics to partner with the TCU Neely School of Business to create the NIL curriculum?
Not quite. I mean, of course, it was part of it, but it was mainly the fact that we knew we would have more than 550 student athletes turn entrepreneurs overnight. Teenagers in desperate need for mentorship, guidance, education in the space that was about to be presented in front of them. President Poland, at the time, Dean Poland and AD Jeremiah Donati got together and brought together what we like to say two powerhouses, TCU Athletics and the School of Business, to better assist our student athletes. So by the time that July 2021 came about, as you all know, when the floodgates opened, we already had a plan in place for an NIL program, a very robust NIL program with an upper level elective course attached to it for all students across TCU. So we had already had a plan.
Could you tell me more about the courses and subjects that are covered in the NIL curriculum and how the decision was made for which topic should be included?
Yeah, so like I said, we knew we were going to inherit about like a little more than 550 entrepreneurs overnight. We knew that it wasn't going to be a legal play, a taxation play, a marketing play. We knew it would be an entrepreneurial play where all these components will be incorporated together. So whenever we went into the class, we took all of that into mind. And so what the class covers, it covers NIL foundational knowledge and compliance as a foundation. Latest NIL developments. And then we go into identity discovery, because student athletes are more than just student athletes. And what we like to say is that everybody has an expiration date when it comes to their athleticism. I'm a clear example of that. If you all were to see me in person, you would never guess that I was a D1 swimmer. So with identity discovery, entrepreneurial brand creation, development, management, and deployment, entrepreneurial brand statement and creation. And when I say entrepreneurial brand creation and entrepreneurial brand statement, we like to say we don't only go over brand management or brand development or deployment, because we believe that we're all born with a brand, but the entrepreneurial way is, the way to make money. We also cover business formation, contracts and legal environment, digital media, emerging technologies, taxation, financial literacy, emerging opportunities, and something very important in our class and our program is mental health and well-being. That's a class that is offered as an upper level elective in the Neely School of Business, open to all students across TCU. We started with, we opened it up to 25 students at first, and it filled up within 23 hours. So we expanded it to 35 as a test. And now, fast forward to today, we have 3 sections of 45 students completely filled 2 days before registration closed, 2 professors teaching it, and we're thinking about opening a 4th one. Everything we offer in the class is also offered through our program, through workshops, team sessions, networking events, speaker events, as well as our professionals in residence who mentor and guide our student athletes.
That's great. That's great. How would you say that the Neely NIL curriculum has helped TCU athletes so far, and what do your athletes think or say about the program?
I think it has, based on the feedback we've received for the past few semesters that we've offered the class, it's been great. We keep getting feedback. As you all know, the NIL space is evolving by the minute or by the second. And so we've gotten great feedback. I think one of the things that shows the most interest is the fact that this class, we barely advertise it, and it gets full before registration closes right away. We have a wait list, and we just finished our semester in terms of feedback, and it was tremendous feedback that we received. And when it comes to financial literacy, we're very blessed that we have a partnership with Robinhood. And we've been able to really go hard on financial literacy, taxation, because those are things that are incredibly important. So great all around.
Thank you. Now, Jeremy, I'll turn to you. When assisting college athletes with reviewing and negotiating NIL deals, what areas do you find that college athletes need the most help understanding?
That's a good question. I do want to start off by saying that I think we need to call NIL what it is. It's not marketing. If we're being honest, it's not. NIL is money coming from the schools to pay the athletes. And how we kind of look at it is that is a salary. 3/4 of NIL money is coming from collectives. The other 25% is coming from brand deals, like those endorsements, those partnerships. So the bulk of your money is coming from the school in some capacity. So when we are navigating these deals with our clients, with our NIL guys, I think it's on a case-by-case basis. I don't have 2 clients that are exactly alike. It also depends on the school that they go to. The biggest thing that they need help with is navigating the language in those contracts. Some schools have their collective set up to where it's a marketing guarantee. So, for example, if a freshman or a senior in high school is signing with a collective with a school, they sign a deal, they make, let's just throw a number out and say $20,000 a month. That is a guarantee whether they play or they don't play, whether they're hurt, whether they're injured, it doesn't matter. That is what they are guaranteed. On the back end, what they have to do is fulfill those marketing obligations within the calendar year. So the collective can call them up and say, hey, we need you to sign autographs. We need you to show up to this dinner. If that structure of the contract is set up in that way, they cannot go out and get additional money in most collectives. If they do go out and get any additional marketing opportunities, they are not able to recoup that money. They actually owe that money to the collective on top of what they're getting. So to answer your question in a short version, understanding the rules of each school and how they work with the collectives is the biggest challenge that we face, because some guys are signing contracts in high school with their parents and those contracts haven't been reviewed. So just understanding how to protect them and let them know what they're able to do and they're not able to do.
And thank you. You mentioned, a lot about like the school's relationship with their athletes, which leads into my next question is that do you find that the athletes that you work with indicate that their school has the resources or educational programs available to assist them with understanding their NIL deals?
Depends on the school. Typically, what I will say is the larger schools, those Power 5 schools, typical schools that, you see them on TV every Saturday. I think they have some good systems set in place. We do have some guys that aren't in those major Power 5 type schools that need a little bit of help and guiding. So what I will say is, I think personally, collectively, the schools can do a better job of the financial part of it to make sure and maintain that these kids aren't just going out and blowing $100,000 in a year, spending money on unnecessary things. Because where I sit in my job, 9 times out of 10, if they are making NIL money, a significant portion like that, their goal is to go to the next level and be pros. And one thing I tell my clients all the time is that the NFL stands for not for long. That money comes, it goes, anything can happen, you can get hurt. So I do think overall as a system, all schools across the board in the landscape of where we are can do a better job of helping these guys invest, even if it's in terms of if the NCAA switches everything to a salary. Well, I think most of us on this call are salaried employees. We have a 401k. Maybe put some money in a 401k. Have something set up for, these student athletes to last once sports is actually over.
Thank you. So, would there be like any particular topic or like resources that you think that the university should ensure that their athletes understand? I know you mentioned financial literacy. Maybe you could, say a little bit more about that, or if there's any other topics that you think that schools should try to make sure that their athletes understand.
Yeah, financial literacy is definitely top of mind. Another thing I would include in that too, just to backtrack for a second, is that I think parents have a lot of influence this day and age. When I was coming out, it wasn't as heavily involved as it is now. But I think, when you do see those top tier athletes making those 6-7 figure NIL collective deals, parents are very heavily involved. And I think that, there should be an obligation for not only the student athlete, but their parents or guardians to take a financial literacy course together. Because a lot of times what I see is, we'll have a guy who's like, hey, I got to send money back home, or, my cousin needs this, or my sister needs that. So making it a family thing, bringing them in, maybe having a Zoom session, I think would go a long way in terms of the financial literacy piece. The other side of it, I would say, is that in terms of how to grow your brand, I think some schools are doing a good job of that. I think some schools are lacking in terms of that, because on the marketing side of NIL things that I do, 10 times out of 10, brands are asking the student athlete to utilize their social media platforms to get those impressions, to capture their audience. So I think things that they post, anytime we sign a guy, we always go back and we're like, hey, let's clean up your social media. Let's do a deep dive. Let's make sure that everything's kosher. So when we pitch you and present you to these brands, we want to make sure everything is buttoned up. So I would say the social side and the financial side are key pieces moving forward.
Thank you. Now I'll turn to you, Angelica. You are one of the founders of Rise HBCU, a HBCU-focused NIL collective. One of the goals of RISE HBCU is to educate HBCU athletes on NIL and NIL related topics, such as business, legal, and intellectual property. How has RISE HBCU met this goal?
Well, one, I feel like we've met the goal by continually making ourselves available and letting our athletes know that we are available to answer questions. That we, if they need, like this summer, one of our athletes, he got a deal on his own, and he was like, Miss Angelica, can you look this over for me? And of course I'm an attorney, so that helps. So I was able to actually look that over, even talk to the person that he was doing the deal with to, get some things cleared up in the contract to make sure that it was the best decision for him. So let them know, like, we're always available to answer questions. One of my athletes, she just did like a campus. She's a campus ambassador for a energy drink company, and she was asking me, what does this mean? And I mean, these are 19, 20-year-old, young people, so they don't really understand like the legal jargon and the terms, and sometimes it's missing when they're getting paid. It says how much they're getting paid, but not when they're getting paid and when they can expect it. So I'm like, y'all need to make sure y'all get that in there. But we're always also making ourselves available to HBCUs. We're trying to reach out to them and let them know like the benefits of engaging in NIL education for them, but also their student athletes as well. And then we are like making sure that we're creating opportunities for people to get educated, whether it's the public, businesses, or student athletes that we may not come in contact with. So we created a conference called the HBCU Athlete Movement Summit, where we bring HBCU athletes together to learn about NIL, personal branding, mental health, finances, everything that they probably could touch when it comes to NIL opportunities, and just being a student athlete. So I think that's the way we're meeting those goals. We're just a little bit over a year old. So, as we continue to grow and talk to student athletes, we are able to understand like the things that they need and the things that they want to hear more about. Just like Jeremy was saying, about the financial piece, a lot of them are interested in entrepreneurship. So trying to make sure we're incorporating that into our educational topics. So that's the way that we've been able to meet that goal, at least from an NIL education side.
You mentioned the HBCU Movement Summit. Could you talk a little more about that? Like what topics you guys discuss, and how it helps the athletes from a NIL education perspective, and maybe perhaps if it helps the HBCU schools as well.
So one of the reasons why we created the HBCU Athlete Movement Summit is because we knew we had capacity on how many athletes that we could work with one-on-one. So we still wanted to be able to touch as many athletes as possible and for them to be able to learn. But then we also realized there was no HBCU athlete focused conference. So we wanted to create a environment where they felt safe to share with one another, but also meet other HBCU athletes, because there's not like a lot outside of playing the sport. There is not always a lot of opportunities for them to meet other athletes at other HBCUs. So we wanted to create an environment for that. Then also, of course, because NIL is a hot topic, wanting to make sure that we are speaking to them about that. So like this past year, we brought in individuals, industry experts, but also individuals who competed at the college level and also professional level. So before we got on, I was talking about Olympic swimmer Cullen Jones. He came and he talked about his experience and even being in the pros and in life after that, and how he was able to use the opportunity as a student athlete, but also an Olympic champion, and then parlay that into an opportunity to work within sports. So we try to make sure that we hit on the topics again that they are interested in. We had like a mental health piece. We had actually a student athlete panel. So where athletes, whether they may have transferred from PWI to HBCU to HBCU, they moved from out of state into, from where they were originally from to where they went to school. So giving a lot of different perspectives that other athletes may not have known about, or they may, you know, identify with. So we had a wide variety of different topics. We did a lunch where like the panelists were able to sit with the student athletes and just kind of talk one-on-one, getting strategy when it comes to NIL, the things they should be talking about on social media, how they should approach NIL opportunities and personal branding. So I'm really excited about the growth of the conference and just giving opportunities to HBCU athletes, because they don't necessarily get the looks that athletes at PWIs or big Power 5 schools do.
And the conference sounds very, very amazing. It's a really worthwhile conference. I actually have one question from the audience that I think would fit well now. They asked us, does Rise HBCU work with HBCUs like the schools, or just with the HBCU players?
So we do work with HBCUs. Originally, like year one, we really wanted to focus on the athlete, but we do work with HBCUs for sure. I've come into, like, I've had coaches reach out to me and I talked to their teams. And then I've talked to like whole, you know, bodies of, you know, the athletes. The athletic department would put on a like a program or something, we would come speak. So we definitely work with HBCUs, and we're opening ourselves up. We're actually going on a school tour starting in January. So if you're interested in us coming to visit your school and talk to your athletic department program and just talk more about NIL and what we have to offer, we are definitely open to that. And we want to hit as many HBCUs as possible.
So is the goal of the tour to provide the educational components to the athletes?
The goal of the tour is more to connect with the athletic department so that they know that we're out there and what kind of services that we offer, so that we can hone in on what they need and because a lot of athletic departments, well, as far as what we've encountered, as far as the HBCU ones, they don't really know much about NIL. Like they're still even coming. It's like we were saying, it's ever changing. So it's hard to keep up with the changes. So a lot of them kind of, you know, have not necessarily kept up with the changes, or they're still understanding what it is and how it affects their student athletes. And they may only see it in a certain way, but they may not understand how they can use it to their advantage. So it's really more to connect with the program, the athletic departments, and really let them know like, hey, we're out here, because again, we're brand new. So a lot of people may not even know that we exist.
All right. And what resources do you believe are necessary to ensure that college athletes, specifically HBCU athletes, have the skills necessary to navigate this NIL space?
Ooh, I'm trying to think of something that hasn't been already mentioned. I think that them, and I don't know if it's really a tool or a resource, but I think athletes coming in and having a vision of how they want to navigate NIL is going to be super important, because a lot of student athletes that come in, they may think of NIL as just like an opportunity to make money, right? Which it is very much that. But some of them are just changing their careers completely because of the opportunities that NIL has presented. So they are utilizing that to even get further into their career. For instance, one of my athletes, he does like videography and does drone work, and, you know, does a lot of like marketing pieces and to put a lot of video work together and graphic design. So he knew that he wanted to be an entrepreneur from day one. So he's utilizing that to get his name out there in different opportunities, so that when he gets out of school, he doesn't want to play professionally. So when he gets out of school, he's already made connections and, you know, utilize his status as an athlete to further his career opportunities, whether it's connections, job opportunities, or whatever. And I've even connected him with like a family member. He's over like a drone program that works for like the in DC, the Department of Transportation. So, you know, even being able to go a little further, I think having vision about how you would want to use this opportunity to your benefit, it could be completely outside of making money, but if you want to take it a little further and maybe, you know, go beyond what you even thought could exist, it's a perfect opportunity to really expound and go the next, you know, go further than you may have even anticipated. So I think having vision, that's something that, you know, of course, legal, understanding what legal terms mean, and having somebody be able to review your contracts, the financial literacy piece. But I think having vision is an important thing, skill to have in vision building, brand building.
Thank you. Jada, I'll turn to you now. So how does the sports management program at the University of New Haven assist athletes with NIL?
Sure. So we are a Division II school in Connecticut, and just wanted to lay the context first, but we are, as the department, are one of the 4 recipients of NCAA Innovation Grant, and our grant is specific on NIL education. We are developing an app-based education for our student athletes. We're hoping that it would be available vastly outside of our student athletes on campus as well. But that's our first step. Besides us and our involvement with the athletic department, it comes with a, you know, comparable to TCU, not that extensive, but we do have athlete branding courses, entrepreneurship courses, and financial literacy or individual personal finance courses, and etc. So we are not, except for the personal or athlete branding course, the others are not necessarily just tailored for student athletes as of now. But with the grant work that we have, we are certainly making it or taking a direction in that way.
Thank you. From a sports marketing perspective, what topics should college athletes be well versed in to get the most out of NIL?
I will first mention, Jeremy said, you know, majority of the deals are not reliant on the athlete's marketing ability or, you know, personal brand perhaps coming from the collectives. But I do still believe, regardless, it is important for a student athlete to recognize who they are. So there is the personal branding aspect for sure. I know Antonio mentioned identity discovery, and I do so very much believe in that statement that he made. When we talk to student athletes, as an athlete myself, maybe Jeremy can think of some of the earlier years from memory. Being an athlete, we thought that was our entire identity, right? So when you talk to a student athlete, who are you, and you know what matters to you, what values, and it all evolves around who they are as a student athlete. And being an athlete is their almost 100% of identity. But a endorsement deal is not tacked to just that aspect of an individual, and student athletes oftentimes don't have that self recognition yet. So relying on that aspect, understanding their personal values, identity, and building a brand based on that is extremely important. So that's the one connection I want to make towards the marketing side. And 2, looking at, you know, social media was mentioned before. Besides that, if we are sending a student athlete to a speaking engagement or a dinner to attend, there are still communication pieces the student athletes may not have mastery for. So everyone understands and everyone assumes that I can just post something on social media and that will hopefully result in some type of earning. It's not that simple. We need to understand, as individual student athletes, your personal brand and what you convey matters on every outlet that you are using. It would be your personal presence that can easily translate into a digital outlet with someone with a phone in the audience, right? So I do believe the integrated marketing communication, a variety of communication tools are extremely important as well. And last but not least, Jeremy mentioned 1/4 of the NIL deals are coming from endorsements. What is an athlete endorsement? What assets you may have as an individual? What is that win-win situation? What does the brand look for? So have understanding about those, being able to manage those expectations and maximizing your value as an individual are important.
You mentioned social media, and social media is a major component of NIL. A lot of deals just consist of athletes posting content on their social media. So, how can a college or university assist their athletes with making sure that they understand how to strategically use their social media?
Right. So if we look at some of the general trends, female athletes are generating more indoor engagement through social media more so than the male athletes. And it is about not that they necessarily just have better creative skills, but they are able to create engaging content, and they are able to showcase a lifestyle. So there is again the personal component, and I will say it ties directly back to discovering who you are as an individual. What is your story? What story you want to convey on social media day in, day out? And is there a consistency, right? So at the end of the day, we are trying to convey a personal brand as an individual. And we as institutions can support students, one, discovering their identity, and two, how properly storytell and be coherent and consistent in conveying those messages.
Thank you. Now I have some questions that I'm going to open up for the entire panel. My first one is, college athletes already have a lot on their plate between being full-time students and full-time athletes. So now, they have this wonderful opportunity with NIL, but, it has created the need for them to learn important topics that are related to NIL, which we discussed here today, from branding to entrepreneurship to legal concepts. So, do you all think that, the requirement to learn these new concepts are more of another burden placed on college athletes, or should it be more looked at as an opportunity to receive a more well-rounded education? And I could start with you, Antonio.
I think in terms of education, it's like we've all talked about is a huge obstacle. It's imperative, and also time management. The latest I've read about is that student athletes have on average 2 hours of free time a day to dedicate to anything else, like even watching Netflix, right? That goes into that. So for brands to expect for student athletes to have the time to be able to dedicate to this, there has to be some expectations and some education, not just for student athletes, but also for brands and for any stakeholders involved. So I guess as a whole, it goes back to education, right?
Does somebody else like to? Yeah. Okay.
I can jump in. So the question was like, is NIL a good opportunity for student athletes or a burden? Is that the gist of the question?
Yeah, so like, is the need to now learn these subjects in addition to your coursework and being a student, should it be viewed more as maybe like an extra burden for them, or just an opportunity to get a more well-rounded education?
Yeah. When I was in school, it was a NCAA violation for us to get a free cheeseburger from McDonald's. So the fact that these kids have the opportunity to actually profit and make money off their name, I'm all for 100%. I think it's long overdue. I think the NCAA, these schools have made so much money off the backs of student athletes that I think they need to go back and pay reparations, honestly. But no, in all seriousness, I think it is a lot being a student athlete as it is. I don't know how it is for other sports, but for football, back when I was in school, I think there was a rule that there was 20 hours maximum for team-related activities. I will tell you that most schools went over that 20 hours between practice, weightlifting, things like that, film, you name it. And then, you go and you have the the student piece of the student athlete. So it is a lot, but I will say, if we're just being completely realistic in terms of NIL, it's not too many athletes that are getting a ton of deals. You know, you're only looking at the top like 1% of each school that are actually committing to time, effort, photo shoots, signing trading cards, you know, having to post. Like, there might be, you know, some things here and there where you might get a $500 deal or $1,000 deal, but in the total grand scheme of it, if you're looking at a football team, for example, let's say it's 120 people, I would say maybe 5 guys are actually actively getting major deals that require time. But to your point, it still is new, and the landscape is so broad and it's so fluid and evolving every day. To understand how to navigate that in an easy way is helpful. There are tools out there, there are apps, there are, you know, technology platforms to help facilitate those. You know, you have Open Doors. There's one more I'm missing, but it basically packages everything up for you. You know, you shoot it, they shoot it to you, you post it, the bio's in there, everything. So there are tools to help, but yeah, I don't think NIL has, if you're looking at the total picture of college athletics, has a major effect on every student athlete.
Well, that's actually a great segue into my next question, which is, do you all believe that NIL education should be required for all college athletes? And being that you just mentioned that not every college athlete is going to garner the same amount of NIL traction. And if so, you know, should the schools maybe consider turning their NIL education courses into a minor in entrepreneurship for athletes? Whoever wants to jump in with a question.
Well, I think there are different type of institutions and different type of sports and different type of personalities, right? So a student may be interested in their name, image, and likeness or not at college setting as a student athlete, but the things that we talked about has a long-term benefit to any student. It doesn't have to be a student athlete. It is a student, your personal brand, your communication skills, financial literacy, understanding contractual law, all of those matter to every single one of us as adults today, right? So I do believe in the value, the solid education that will make the student athletes a well-rounded professionals moving forward. Some of them may or may not be thinking about entrepreneurship as outside of their own personal brand, but this also prepares them to, you know, have careers as entrepreneurs in any industry for that matter. So I do see a lot of value in it. And again, not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur and be their own boss. But from personal branding and understanding the basics of these foundational areas, I think it is valuable.
I think that at least some type of like a, I don't know, like an intro session or something should be, I won't say required, but definitely open to all students to attend like yearly, because you know, a student's situation like their freshman year may not be their situation their junior year. You know, I remember my mom, she was like, you need to focus your freshman year, you know, get in there, just get focused, like figure out how you want things to be and get your schedule together. And then you can get involved in other stuff. So I think, and then of course, maturity, like and Jetty was saying, like, you know, these are skills, very transferable skills that can be learned to, you know, push towards a career or building their brand outside of them being an athlete, which is, again, the whole identity piece is so big for them to, again, understand and establish while they're still an athlete, so that when they make that transition, it's a little bit smoother and they have a more of a plan, versus them feeling like they have nothing and they have no skills to offer and they have nothing to offer outside of, you know, performing or playing a sport. So I think that maybe some type of intro session every year just to even, again, because it's like repetition. You hear it once and you're like, well, no, I don't know. And then you hear it again, you're like, or somebody says it a different way. I didn't know I could do that with NIL opportunities. So I think some type of intro opportunity would be good for schools to offer, even if it's not like a requirement, just putting it out there and giving, athletes a chance to attend and just something to pique their interest.
If I may jump in quickly, is that right, cousin? So TCU, based on Jeremy's point of the 1% of NIL student athletes that would benefit from NIL or that have NIL deals, we have about a little over 560 student athletes at TCU, small private university. For like the latest number I looked, we have 440 student athletes that have engaged with more than 2 NIL deals in just 2022 and 2023. From those 440 students, that's 2 or more NIL deals. Of course, there are some collective deals in there that we need to make the distinction between collectives and NIL. But those students who are having brand deals, they need that education. So at TCU, we have NIL education that is housed in athletics. We have NIL education that's housed under Neely NIL, which is a program. And we have NIL education, which is a course offering that we have. If these student athletes, generally non-revenue generating sports, are getting those brand deals and they're putting the digital footprint out there, taking not just cash, but other kinds of compensation as they get their NIL going, it's very important for us to be able to be there to educate them as they're taking these deals that, will leave a digital footprint for their future. And at the same time, these brand deals that they are landing is their opportunity for them to get a taste of what it is to have a job, to have a responsibility, because before that, TCU, we pride ourselves that we do a pretty decent job helping out student athletes with internships, remote internships. But when you see a resume of a student athlete, it's pretty bare, right? And so these NIL deals are allowing for these student athletes to engage and participate in this entrepreneurial gig economy. But these are teenagers that need the education in order to be able to be successful.
I want to jump back in on the 1% comment. So I was talking in terms of being a burden to their schedule and like to their times, their day to day. Like I was mentioning, like the $500 deals, the $1,000 deals, like those are spread pretty thin across the board. But in terms of like the clients that we represent at Octagon, like a Haley Van Lith, for example, when she was at Louisville, like we would have to fly her out in the middle of the week to do a photo shoot for Adidas, and then get her back on campus for classes the next day. So that's what I was meaning in terms of like the 1% of it being a burden. But in general, NIL is widely accessible to all student athletes for sure.
And I wanted to say, like, I know that people may not be aware, but like when it comes to the creator economy, it's been said that it's going to double in the next 5 years. So like creating content and the influencer market, it's just going to build and build and build. And, the younger generation, they are really in tune when it comes to technology and creating. So to Antonio's point, like these skills and the different exposure that they are able to get from like engaging in NIL or even like brand building is going to be helpful. And, the resume thing that I was just like, yes, because, a lot of athletes, they feel like they are not getting the full experience because they don't have necessarily the time to engage in like a full-time internship or engage in those activities or opportunities that regular college students get to engage in. So like picking up those skills from other places and then maybe making a little money or getting some free merch or products or whatever. And, while you're doing it, that's even greater of an opportunity. And I think schools need to be more tapped into that, like understanding the opportunities that are available that can come from this, instead of it just being like, oh, this is just a distraction, because, it's not going away. Like we've opened the door. Like, it's not going anywhere. So you might as well embrace the benefit and figure out how it can work for you, but also your student athletes as well.
I want to piggyback off that. So in terms of the school's relationship with those, you know, and Antonio, to your point too, like those mass type deals, a lot of times what we see is that a brand will go to a collective and say, hey, I have this pot of money, split it out amongst your student athletes equally. And then we need the content, we need the appearance, whatever the deliverables may be. So to your point, Angelica, I think that the school can do a better job when facilitating those deals instead of making it transactional, taking that extra step and saying, hey, let's coach you and let's guide you through this. So that way it kind of sets them up in the future when those deals do come through as well. Because a lot of times it's just like, hey, post this on your Instagram and that's it, we'll pay you. But actually sit down with each client, with each athlete, student athlete, and tailor it to their brand and you know, teach the ins and the outs of what you're doing.
And I think like schools doing that, it shows that they are actually invested in the student athlete or in the student in general, right? Like there's like schools I'm not saying even getting a bad rap because we already know the history, but they're the boogeyman. Like they're the ones taking from these students and they're not giving outside of a free education, right? So, you know, them showing like we're vested in your success now and later, and we want to do this. And then also like the sponsors for the schools, they're looking at these student athletes and figuring out how they can work with them. That is a step further. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's taking money out of the school's, you know, pocket. It very well can just extend that relationship and give the brand a little bit more of a touch point because they're actually being able to work with the individuals who their monies are benefiting. So it just makes sense. I'm not sure why schools are just so like, oh, you know, but it just makes sense in the whole realm of things, but it's all about perspective.
Yeah, those are all very great points, which I think kind of leads into my next question is, how much of a role do you all believe that the educational offerings and resources that a school has to support a athlete as they navigate their NIL opportunities plays in the athlete's decision to attend that school or to transfer to a certain school? Whoever wants to jump in first.
Look, Angel Reese said that she went to LSU because they were engaging in, you know, NIL education and really putting that energy into their student athletes. So I say yes.
When I drafted that question, I was thinking about what she said about LSU. So, anybody else like to chime in on that?
Antonio, you want to go? No, okay. I think it goes back to what I led the conversation with. Like, not all collectives are assembled equally. Some have a little bit more money than others. And I think it gets to a point, especially in this past week, if you guys are looking at transfer news, like it is musical chairs. It is where can I get my biggest bag? Who is going to pay me the most? That's what it's kind of turned into. Because again, like from where I sit, NIL is a salary from the school. And marketing and those endorsements and, you know, posting a bottle of Gatorade, that's kind of secondary. It's still a huge piece. I'm not diminishing that by any means. But when you reach that certain caliber of status, I guess you can say, at a Power 5 school, I think what the determining factor is like how much am I guaranteed I'm going to make. Then I'm looking at, okay, what resources do you have internally at your school to help grow my brand and help grow my social presence? And then I guess a third outlier would be for that top 1% of college athletes, they'll come to an agency. They'll utilize us. We're obviously not the only game in town. There's multiple big agencies, but to take it a step further, to pour gasoline on that fire, it's like, okay, well, I'm getting guaranteed money from the collective. My school is helping me grow my digital footprint and my brand. And on top of that, I have an agent who is going out on my behalf, securing larger deals for me. So I think right now the trend is like, I want to get my money, and whoever's going to pay it to me and help me grow my money, that's where I want to be.
All right, so for I believe my next question, I think my final question before we get into the rest of the Q&A is, if Congress enacts, well, actually, I'll probably have one more after this. If Congress enacts a federal NIL law establishing a new NIL standard, do you think a part of it should address NIL education? If so, what topics or things would you like to see included in the provision that addresses NIL education?
I'll jump in. Like we've talked about taxation, financial literacy, and not per se like a standardized contract, but standard items that need to be included in every NIL contract, be my opinion.
I will say that it certainly should include the NIL education, if there will be such step forward, especially considering it is attached to higher ed and it is part of what we do. We educate our students. So I think there's certainly a need for including name, image, likeness education as part of the law if that becomes the next steps. And I do feel similarly about financial literacy. Some legal terminology, understanding contract law and such would be definitely necessary.
I guess this isn't necessarily like a part of the educational piece per se. But if Congress were to step in, this is kind of like a wild idea / wish list type endeavor. But I think that Congress should put in rules for each state to set the bar and say, hey, this is a livable wage per state, per city, however you want to calculate it. And I think that NIL should be uncapped. Any student athlete should be able to make as much as they want to, but in college, with being that young, being at 18, 19-year-old, I think that the cap that they're able to touch is whatever a livable wage is for that state, and the rest goes in a trust, and it can invest, it can grow, and they're able to touch it after their eligibility is up or if they declare. And then I would even go as further to say, like, put an incentive on graduating. Like, if you graduate, we will give you X percentage of what's invested in your 401k or your trust from your NIL earnings. But I think just putting regulations on, essentially, to answer your question, I think putting regulations on how much money is given up front to these student athletes would go a long way as well. Because that will help with the financial piece, because that's a part of life. As adults, we deal with that. And I think getting a jump start on being able to save and invest, I think that would all tie in together.
And I do have one more question, just in light of the big news that came out, I think it was Tuesday, where NCAA President Charlie Baker released his proposal for creating another division where the schools who want to opt in can create like a trust, like you just mentioned, for athletes. I think the minimum requirement would be like $30,000, something like that, and the schools would be able to enter NIL deals with their athletes themselves. So I wanted to ask, what, if any, effect this may have on like NIL from the school perspective, NIL education perspective. So whoever wants to chime in first.
I don't know if I read that correctly, if my memory is accurate, but based on my recollection, it did mention that there would be a $30,000 and it goes towards a fund. And but it seemed to me that it was in place of name, image, and likeness deal. So they were trying to take a different approach and take this one out. I don't think we can not allow student athletes to utilize their own name, image, and likeness. I can use it as a faculty member, as a citizen, as a individual. If we are going to take that route of, generating a trust fund and separating certain schools, I don't think that should come at the cost of name, image, and likeness.
I agree. And that's how I read it as well, that it was supposed to like basically replace and seems like cap, or they have a cap, which I don't know if that that's going to solve the issue, but I agree with you, Jada, like they should be able to do other things even in addition to those things as well. But I don't know if I have an actual like wish list as Jeremy has or anything like that. But I think this new approach is interesting, but I also think that it is potentially showing like where this is going. I think it's a nice try by the NCAA. I'll just say that. Nice try.
Right now, we'll open it up for some questions that we have in the Q&A. One that was directed to you, Antonio. The question is, what topics are covered by the Robin Hood folks in the financial preparedness portion of your program?
Yeah, of course. So Robinhood, more than anything, is a financial supporter for us to focus our efforts or be able to grow our efforts, financial literacy. So covering such as, budgeting, saving, investing, portfolio diversification, credit, retirement, insurance. So basically the basics of financial literacy. And of course, it comes with not just a financial support, but also the mentors that they help us out with, so we can have speakers in the classroom. So that's pretty much it. Yeah.
And the next question addresses NIL collectives, and it says, how can we make collectives more equitable with the distribution of money to male athletes versus female athletes? Are there any incentives or laws such as Title IX that can encourage more equitable distribution of funds?
I'll just speak from like our experience with our collective. We make sure that we are creating opportunities, like equal opportunities, or that there are equal opportunities available. Now, if a brand comes to us and they say they want to work with a particular athlete, that's something different. But what we're doing, we try to make sure that we are creating equal opportunities. And we've even had brands come to us and say they want to specifically work with our female athletes because they are not getting the same amount of deals via collectives as like their male counterparts. So I can, speak that, but I definitely think that is going to be very interesting given the fact, is it Oregon, where the athlete, she filed a lawsuit and mentioned NIL as far as like collective, the inequity as far as collectives are concerned. I think Title IX is going to continue to come up, and you never know, like with the whole this new proposal by the NCAA may help address, but I think there's going to have to be something in place that establishes some type of equity to continue to comply with Title IX, especially if now the schools are going to be connected to giving money and providing funds for student athletes. But I don't know if there is a way without enforcing Title IX or lawsuits or whatever. I don't know if there is a way to make sure that they're getting equitable opportunities, or female athletes are getting equitable opportunities, because we know like a lot of those revenue sports are, male dominated teams or sports. So I'm not sure what the solution is, but I definitely think having the different lawsuits and different things does push the envelope and keep the topic in front and center, or at least one of the topics front and center that needs to be addressed.
I had a professor in college that told us that eyeballs and butts, that those are what's most important when it comes to college sports. Eyeballs, who's watching you on TV, those TV rights, those licensing deals, and butts and seats. How many people are coming out? Are you selling out the stadium, the arenas? There are many women's teams that can do both. So in terms of equity, I think I think everybody should be for it. I don't want to speak for everybody, but you should want equity, but you also have to look at the landscape of the dollar drives everything. And where those big contracts are, typically that's where the money is. And I think we've, since 2020 at least, when the NBA went down to Orlando for the bubble, like they had a wubble, they had a women's, like that's the first time we really actually engaged in women's sports on that level, because there was nothing else going on. So it's like, hey, this is actually cool, I think when you see the emergence of like Caitlin Clark's and Paige Becker's, those type of superstar type collegiate athletes, I do personally feel like women's sports over the past 2 to 3 years have gotten a lot more prominent in the media. And I think the ceiling hasn't even been scratched yet, because there's so many more opportunities for women's sports to take that stage. So to answer the question, hopefully, it continues to trend up, and there are those opportunities there to do that.
I do want to tag along briefly and just highlight there are a variety of women's sport and college athletics that actually make revenue. If you look at the current trends in terms of volleyball, you do see football stadiums filling up for volleyball games. We have known NCAA softball is a revenue generating sport. It's on ESPN, and some schools are making millions of dollars. So we can't just discard some of those successes that are there and just rely on anecdotal or, it has always been this way and this programs will get and the others will be sidelined. I am hoping that there will be equity, whether through Title IX or other ways.
The next question is, what is your take on the lack of NIL for international student athletes? And then I would just like to add to that too, like what can schools, their athletic departments, or from an educational standpoint do to support international students in NIL?
I don't have an answer, but I maybe have more questions. I don't know if it will help, but maybe it will help us brainstorm with everyone's background. I was an international student many years ago. I didn't play sports here because I played professional back home, so I was ineligible to do so. But thinking with the lens of, if we are thinking about foreign professional athletes coming to America with a certain type of visa, they still can sign endorsement deals, can't they? I think they can, right? So if we're allowing, no? Yeah,
It's a lot of red tape to go through. And
okay.
To your point, yeah, it's a legal thing. It's not that they can't, it's just a lot of legalities behind it, because we're dealing with that as well. But I don't want to interrupt.
No, exactly. I actually throw in some of those, hoping that you would actually come into the conversation. And the reason I brought it up is as an international student, you are only allowed to work on campus and up to a certain number of hours. And that's restricted during the semester, and off season or off semester is a little bit more flexible. But there are a lot of red tape just for athletes, just for students and not athletes at all, right? So there is the legal component that applies to all foreign students from that perspective. But if we are thinking it the lens of, if you are a entertainment personality or, you know, a brand personality at a professional level, if they are able to sign an endorsement deal, I think maybe we will find our pathway towards allowing international students. I don't know how, but I hope we will go from that direction.
I will say, my alma mater is the University of Kentucky. And on the basketball side, you know, Coach Cal, you know, we have some international guys, and he finds a way to do it, and gets it done quickly. So it is possible. It's just, it's a process, to be able to work with American brands, you know, from a taxation standpoint, it's a lot of red tape to go through. So it's possible, but to answer the question, for the lack of it, I don't think it's not because internationals aren't wanted, or, you know, they don't fit a brand model or anything like that. It's just more of a headache to get those deals done.
And I think it has something to do with eligibility too, like them engaging in it could affect their eligibility. I actually have an international student that I'm looking to work with, or that wants our assistance at a HBCU, which a lot of international students attend HBCUs, and I'm like trying to make sure, even as a lawyer, like I'm making sure that this is not going to negatively affect the athlete, and making sure that we are in compliance and everything like that. So it's something that I'm delving in and trying to make sure I'm educating myself about, because it has continued to come up. Even one of the schools that I have spoken with, it was international students that were asking advice about that as well. So I wish the Congress, that's something that I want to be a part of, national NIL legislation, if it were to happen, that international students will be able to engage equally as American student athletes.
Can I throw a question out there? So because we know that international students are students, F1 students. I was one myself. And there, I mean, I guess you know, in the class, we help them equal in terms of for them to grow their NIL. But one thing is immigration and visa, and the other one, the ability to work in US soil. And so if something were to open for international students to be able to do that, now you're opening it up for F1 students, I guess, to be able to work in international soil. So it would have to be, in my opinion, a visa that is specific, just like the plethora of visas are out there that are specific to student athletes, just like there's visas for investors and engineers and such, right? To mark that distinction. Otherwise, the underfunded international offices at schools are going to end up getting in some trouble from an international student doing something they're not supposed to be doing. And I'm not saying a student athlete, I'm saying a student, when the doors would open. So I think that might take some time. I think in the meantime, we can guide, we can mentor, and we can advise those international students for them to keep their NIL and the education. But in terms of NIL and international students, my view is, you know, as a former international, now US citizen, one thing is immigration and working US soil, and another one is NIL, is a job. Oh, I said the word job.
Um, Thank you. Back to like gender equity. To what extent does equal treatment of female athletes depend on the institution's predicate decision to promote and invest in publicity and marketing to put women's sports on TV?
Well, if it is not discoverable, it is not bringing the eyeballs or the butts, right? So as Jeremy said, so it is very much dependent on we investing and providing the same promotional opportunities, support and material and resources to women's sports within our athletic departments. The more discoverable they are, the more attention they get. And in the last 3 years, we talked about bubble and wobble, and on that timeline, NWSL was the first professional league. I'm not saying women's league, I'm saying professional league. It was the first league that came back to play during the pandemic, and that put them on the media programming that brought the eyeballs, and that brought them this year a very, very large, comparing to the history, a media rights deal, right? So we are showing within the societal trends and audience desire or the interest, women's sports gets the eyeballs if we put it on TV, if we put it or give them the outlet to reach the public. So we have seen it. We are seeing it every week. This NCAA volleyball, whether Nebraska or other teams, are exceptional, and they are exceptional examples showcasing the interest and desire, the popularity that they have.
And obviously, if we're looking in terms of the school, like I think the school itself is the micro level. And if we're looking at the macro level, it's the actual league within they play in, so an SEC, a Big 12, a Big 10, a Pac-12, they're the ones that are negotiating rights and TV rights with these big networks. So it's a trickle down effect. Like obviously the school should want to promote their own sports, that's a given. But again, it's coming from the actual league level to get those distribution rights on certain channels, certain networks to promote the women's sports as well.
That's excellent point. And we can take it even one more further out and say NCAA should be selling the rights separately instead of lumping some of the sports together, right? So that will create additional revenue to be streamlined.
How are NIL curriculums speaking about the underinvestment in women's sports and the impact that it has on today's NIL and media climate?
I don't think I got the question you're asking.
It says the question is how it says the NCAA has sponsored men's sports for 75 years or longer, longer than it has for women. So how are NIL curriculums addressing or speaking about the underinvestment in women's sports and the impact that it has on today's NIL and media climate?
To me, if we're looking at individual levels, and I will say, when we first started talking about NIL in 2021, I don't think society suspected that female athletes at college level would cash in, but they do, right? And we didn't. I don't think everybody assumed the quarterback or the basketball star player and the men's basketball team would be making the money. But we certainly see the female gymnasts out there making the deals. We are seeing women's basketball players making deals, volleyball players. So I think that showcases, if this is name, image, and likeness, it is an individual potential. Yes, you do need the investment from your schools and conferences. But I think women or our female student athletes were able to utilize their own lifestyle and showcase through their content creation and captured the audience.
I want to add to that real quick too. Obviously, NIL is new to everybody, and at Octagon, we are very selective in terms of NIL who we work with. So we don't have a huge, massive roster of clients for NIL. But I will say, on the women's side, they are almost tripling the amount of revenue that our men's NIL clients are. And that is 100% fact. They, from in terms of apparel deals to product deals, it's not even a close comparison. So obviously those female clients are few and far in between. I understand that. But in terms of if we're looking apples to apples, our female clients versus our male clients in NIL, it's not even a close comparison. Women has surpassed that for sure.
May I ask, what do you like see like the differences are that make that, you know, those numbers be that way?
For example, Haley Van Lith, she's one of our clients. She just transferred to LSU. Obviously, being on the LSU women's basketball team, you're going to get a lot of notoriety, but she had that even when she was at Louisville before. You know, Hannah Hidalgo, so she's at Notre Dame. So when you're looking at the programs that they're in, I think going back to the eyeballs things, like if they're on TV, they're the best player on their team while on TV, that does help, you know, a lot as well. But in terms of the guys that we have on the NIL side, you know, they're at Power 5 conferences, they're in the SEC. One of our guys was Player of the Year in the American Athletic Conference, you know, as a quarterback, top 10 quarterback in the draft coming up. I think it's still just going back to Jada's point, like women are able to produce more organic content that resonates with an audience versus, you know, some of our guys, I'll be honest with you, like they don't like posting, they don't like marketing. They just want the money from it. But when it comes down to the work and the deliverables that go behind it, it's like pulling teeth, you know? So I think women, you know, not to be gender biased, but I think women are a little bit easier to work with in terms of engaging with their audience. And again, I don't want to generalize that but from where I'm sitting and you know what I've encountered, it's a little bit easier.
Can I ask a question? That was Jeremy, what you just said, I was gonna ask, because is that the reason why like the whole collective dynamic is the way it is, and them being so male sports focused, it seems, versus women athletes being more being able to get more of the brand deals, and it actually being more lucrative than going with the, you know, what they could make with the collective? Like, what is that I mean, and I didn't even think about it that way, but is that the reason why, like?
Well, I think it's both. I think it's both. In terms of the collectives, like, yeah, majority of your money is going to football. Like, let's just be honest, it is. I don't know if that'll ever change, but right now that's just how it is. So those deals, when they're presenting offers to players, it's like, okay, well, here's $250,000. You just go perform on the field and win games. For women's sports, they may not have the same, I guess, platforms, because Power 5 football is a big platform. That's a huge platform. So they may not necessarily as big of platforms, but it's like, okay, we're still going to take care of you in the collective. Now, here's this brand, or here's this company that you can work with and make even more money. Those opportunities don't really come for football as much as I feel like they do women's sports. I definitely think women's sports have more marketing opportunities. Like our basketball division gets, their phone rings way more than mine. I will tell you that when it comes to brands.
Does that mean that because the female athletes are seeming like they're getting more of the true NIL experience, are they going to be more prepared for life after sports than their male counterparts? That is something to talk about, or to at least think about. because they're the ones really engaging in, you know, the true NIL experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's in order to execute at a high level and make those massive contracts, like attention to detail is very key. How things are positioned, editing, captions, different things like that. Again, not generalizing by stereotypes, but a lot of my guys just aren't into that. They aren't like, oh, I gotta have this angle, I want this caption, I want that. It's just like, hey, just tell me what to post and I'll do it. But I think what I've seen internally is that even with, you know, Haley, she's turned down 5-figure contracts before, like turned down money because she's like, this does not fit my brand. So I think, you know, obviously, you know, you can't compare every single thing to that or every single person to that. But again, internally, from what I see and from what my experience is, women surpass NIL dollars, true marketing dollars over our male clients.
Wow. Well, yeah, thank you all. I think this panel has been a great discussion. You know, I want to thank you all for your time today. We are at our stopping point as far as time goes. So again, thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the guests who attended. If you would like, the Drake Group will be having another panel on January 18th entitled NCAA Governance, Is There a Future? It'll be at the same time at 2 o'clock. So if you would like to look out for the registration for that panel. Again, thank you to everyone for your participation today.